Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, the place for cops who want to transform their leadership, create more resilience, and generate more balance in their life. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Teslaw, and I'm a full-time lieutenant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm glad you're with us today. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at the Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure to join our Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads and a weekly email from me on things you need to know about. I also send out content that's exclusive to that list, so don't miss out on something that can help you in your life or in your job. Join our list at thesquadroom.net. This episode is sponsored by officerprivacy.com. In the age of the internet, social media, and smartphones, there's so much amazing information at our fingertips. I can research any topic or person I want to and learn all about them, their family, and way more information than I really should be able to. The problem is, people can do that research on us too. Whether we like it or not, our information is on the internet, out there for people to find, even the bad guys. Just accepting this and doing nothing isn't an option. We as cops have a giant target on our back these days. Sometimes that's literal and it's life or death, and other times it's just dealing with potential harassment. Either way, we don't want to expose our families to these risks. Being careful about what you post on social media doesn't go far enough. It's easy for a bad guy with an iPhone and free Wi-Fi to hunt you down. That's why OfficerPrivacy.com exists. My friend Pete James is the founder, and he spent 25 years in law enforcement here in California, using much of his career to hunt down the criminals and evidence on the computers and the internet that we now use. Pete knows how easy it is to find you, and since he's one of the good guys, he can help. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will work to scrub the internet's top 50 people search sites that can expose your home address. Then they work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they will remove you again. They also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and the technical ability to do it yourself. I don't, so that's why I use their premium service, but you can do it all yourself using their proprietary software. You can remove yourself and your family members from these same top 50 people search sites on the internet, and then use the software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure that you haven't been added back. To learn more about how you can keep safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. You know, whether you're the chief, a sergeant, a patrol officer, or anyone in between, one of the most time-consuming and frustrating parts of managing people is dealing with the schedule. From shift bids to overtime and special events, vacation requests, court overtime, and unexpected critical incidents and major disasters, the schedule is like a living, breathing beast that must be wrestled with at every level of an agency. If your agency is still living in the dark ages, running off an Excel spreadsheet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's why I'm so impressed with InTime. InTime is designed specifically for public safety agencies, from police and sheriff's offices to corrections, dispatch, and fire agencies. Their cloud-based system and their smartphone app allow officers to access the system from anywhere to sign up for overtime, submit vacation requests, and get updated on court subpoenas. Their system is incredibly easy to use and only takes a few minutes, not hours, to understand and begin using. Major agencies like the Anaheim Police Department, Pittsburgh Police, Passaic County Sheriff's Office, CAL FIRE, and many others trust InTime to save them time and money. If you're interested in spending less time on scheduling, eliminating redundant and expensive overtime, increasing your compliance with subpoenas, and reducing the stress and fatigue on your employees, please, I beg of you, go to intime.com/the squad room to learn more about their system. All right, my guest today is Charlie from 10-8 Entertainment, 10-8 Memes, however you say it. I'm 45. I don't know how you say it. Charlie, real quick, before I entered, is it memes? Okay. Well, you should know. You're the meme lord.
That's how I've said it. Well, it's just like GIF or GIF. I've always called it a GIF. So I feel like GIF is a peanut butter. So
well, however you say it, memes or what, you are the meme lord of Instagram. I'm excited to have this conversation. It's a little different than a lot of the ones I've been having recently that focus on a particular topic, and this is just more about your experience as a cop, and we'll get into all that sort of stuff. But excited to have you here. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
For You're very welcome. For listeners of the show who are also readers of my newsletter, my Tactical Tuesday newsletter that goes out every Tuesday. And if you don't get that, you should be. You can get it at thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays. And in that newsletter, Charlie, I send out like 5 or 6 bullet points every week of things that I think are informative or useful in training or just funny or that might help someone in some off-duty capacity or whatever. And I've actually had to stop myself from sharing your memes over and over and over and over again in those newsletters because they're so funny and because they land with me as a veteran cop because they speak to the job so well. So,
Thank you.
so I guess my first point is just thanks for doing that because it's a lot of fun to read. I feel as a 45-year-old guy, I don't know if I'm supposed to be. Am I allowed to still do memes and all that sort of stuff? But I enjoy them. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking about this a while ago. Like memes have kind of replaced like the political cartoon. Like, growing up, the newspaper had the political cartoon where they would make the
Yes.
satire about whatever was the big issue of the day. Memes have definitely become that medium, which is good because it's free. Like it takes zero artistic ability, takes a little bit of sarcastic humor, and then you just kind of able to put one and two together, and then you get it. So yeah, it was amazing to me when I started the page. Well, not even before I started the page, the fact that people related to it that I didn't work with. When I started the page back in 2019, it started because one of my memes that I would just send into my squad group chat got leaked. I don't know how. That's neither here nor there, but it got shared by a popular internet cop and it got thousands of likes. I was like, what the hell is this? So I messaged that person and I was like, hey man, just letting you know, I made that meme. And he's like, oh, that's cool. And they just kind of left it at that. I was like, no, I want credit for what I made. So I've always kicked around just the 10-8 branding years and years and years ago before I even knew what I was going to do or whatever, before I even thought about Instagram or the internet. So I just made 10-8 memes for no other reason than just like a place to put my memes just in case they get stolen, a place to find them again.
Mm-hmm.
And when I made them, I just moved to a brand new apartment. I didn't even have my internet set up. I was making memes out of boredom in my apartment, and I uploaded them on my my 4G or 5G, whatever it was, and I left the page open, and I went back to that Instagram or Facebook cops social media, and I tagged myself in it. I don't think that did anything, to be honest. But when I started getting likes on all the memes that I posted, I think I posted like 5, and I'm like, all right, no one's really gonna follow this shit, so I'm wasting my time here. But when I started getting posts outside of my inner circle, I was like, what's going on here? And so the fact that people like yourself, who are career long law enforcement officers, can look at what I'm doing, from across the country and going, that's relatable. That was the first sign that I was like, wow, there's a huge culture out here that I didn't even realize existed. I thought it was just at my agency.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think that medium. I think you're absolutely right about the political cartoon. I never thought about that. That's absolutely correct. But one of the things about them that is so funny is that they're so universal, like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
and that's something we often talk about on the serious side of law enforcement. The things we see, the traumas, the dangers, those are consistent, whether you're a rural cop in North Dakota or a urban cop in Miami, or somewhere in between in California. But the experience of being the cop is still the same thing. Like we all deal with it, and it's the same in Canada, and it's the same in New Zealand and
Yeah.
England, and so on. And it like it becomes an inside joke too, because like if you don't do this job, you just don't understand it, right?
Right.
And I tell people all the time, especially when people are bemoaning the public's attitude towards us, like we can't expect the public to know
They don't get
what our
it.
job is like. They don't get it, and they won't. And it's not like they are not willing, but if you've never chased a like naked oiled up man on PCP before, you're just not going to understand what that experience is
Right.
like, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so that's why I think your community that you're building is so engaged and so vibrant with this, is because it is a place to kind of have that shared experience with people from around the world.
Right. And I agree. I think, back in the day, and it's funny because this came up the other day over the weekend, but Mike the Cop and Officer Daniels and stuff, when they were on Vine and they were making videos, they were relatable to everybody being like law enforcement officers, because it was real. It was stuff that we dealt with, like it was kind of a exaggerated truth, but it was still close enough to reality where it's like, all right, whatever, it's comedy, so it's supposed to be exaggerated. Um, and I think that's where this started. I think when you look back on all social media and all cops on social media, it can all come back to Mike the Cop and Officer Daniels, and everything kind of splintered off from that. And I've never been comfortable putting my face on camera. We were talking about that before. And they were perfectly fine. That's fine. If I was comfortable with it, I can't say I wouldn't put myself in front of the camera, but I'm not, because of work issues and whatever. That being said, what they started out doing was relatable and funny. And I found a way to do it faceless and still be relatable and funny. And, you look at people like Poorly Made Police memes and 5 Oh My God, That's Awesome, and all the big pages that came before me. And while they may have laid the groundwork for the meme content, something I've learned over the last 3 years is that plenty of cops have plenty of jokes to say, whether they're the same joke or a little different or whatever. If nothing else, it's a way for that single officer to vent about his day. But then when we start getting people that we don't know starting to be like, wow, that's really funny, I dealt with that yesterday, or I dealt with that last week, like, are you in my briefing room? That's where we build this community. And that's where we that's where we build this community.
Mhm.
And I think that's the safe part of it, is that we realize it's not just us. So when you do start feeling kind of alone in these experiences, because you may not feel comfortable reaching out to, your squad mate about it for whatever reason or another, stigma or whatever, but to know that there's a faceless person on the internet that feels the same way, that's a significant thing, especially in a job where you deal with significant things 12 hours a day.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back because I got a bit ahead of myself just diving in and
Sure.
talking, but I want to make sure people know some of your history too, and that you've done that job, you've experienced the life, and you know what it's about. Can you give us your brief bio of your career and how? And I'm also curious how you got into law enforcement, because as we were talking before I just hit record, I see a lot of parallels in our
Mhm.
lives, and we've chatted before, like
Mhm.
mostly DMs or whatever. Um, but we've gone back and forth enough for me to see a lot of pattern recognition in the kind of sequence of our
Right.
lives. So
Well,
share that
we're
with me.
trained in pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I started my law enforcement career at 24 is when I joined the police academy. And it started because I had gone down a couple different paths as far as schooling and whatever, and it didn't pan out one reason or another. And I had a buddy who was in the police academy, and I kept bothering them with questions going, hey, what's this class like? What's this class? And they're like, just take it. And I was like, well, I had just gotten into the University of Florida for foreign affairs. And I said, well, if that doesn't pan out, I'm going to go with, I'll check out the police academy. And it didn't pan out. I couldn't afford to go. So I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to, I don't know if we can curse.
Go
I
right
was like,
ahead.
okay. I was like, screw it. I'm going to go ahead and try the police academy. Now, I'm not like a thrill seeker. I'm not a big fan of roller coasters, anything like that. But my dad was a cop growing up. He became a private investigator, and I've always been interested in investigations and things like that. It was always around me. So I went through it. My academy experience was very, especially talking to cops around the country and the world, very bland compared to other people. Like, we were not paramilitary at all. It was way more college based than anything else. Later in my career, I felt like it was a disservice, honestly, but went through it, passed. As I was going through, everyone that was in the academy with me, they were like getting conditional offers at this sheriff's office, this police department. I was like, man, I don't even know what I'm doing. So I started just shotgun blasting applications out somewhere. I did a ride along at 2 small PDs near me, and then the big city near me. Right before Christmas break for school, stopped by. The recruiter hit me up and was like, hey, I heard you're doing really good in school. Come do a ride along with us. So I did, and I loved it. The first 2 were um, just, a bunch of Karens and grandmas calling because, someone's parking in their yard or the garbage cans are in their yard, or whatever. Um, I wasn't about that. Very boring. The third agency, the one that I ultimately got hired with, we were driving down the main strip at 3 o'clock in the morning, going 90 miles an hour, licensed sirens to an armed home invasion. I was like, this is awesome. Sign me up. So I applied. I got in as a civilian at first. And after time passed, whatever, I got hired. So I did 5 years. No, I'm sorry. I did a total of 6.5 years at this agency, about 4 of which were on the road. Then I did about 2 years, a year and a half in what was called the problem oriented policing unit, which is like a special fancy term for like code enforcement meets narcotics. That's basically what we did. And then I was also crime scene investigator for 3 years. Then I made the decision to go across Florida. So I was on the East Coast. I went to the West Coast, and I was going to be a cop down there. Got hired, and I had started. I did about a month through their training. I had a lot of trauma happen that year, and I ultimately decided to leave the road, and I went into dispatch. So that's kind of a very brief history on my career. But I started civilian, then I went to the road, did that for about 6 years. Then I went back to a different agency, and ultimately, right now, I'm in dispatch.
And I want to unpack all of that in different parts. I want to go
Mm-hmm.
back to something you said that's kind of interesting because I seem to be on the sunsetting end of an opinion about police academies, and you mentioned it, which was that you had a very college-based education type academy, and you've talked to others who had very paramilitary. I went through an academy here, which is typical for Southern California, especially California and all, really, and all that it was very paramilitary, um, very strict, high stress kind of environment. If people want to like get a sense of what it's like, you can Google Black Monday LA County Sheriff's Department, and it's very similar to that. That's not my academy I went through, but it's very, very similar. Um, but my agency would typically pull from 2 academies and then they would hire laterals. And so my academy was super high stress. The other academy at the time was more college based, low stress. And I've heard people who went through that academy tell me that they felt it was a disservice to them. And now in hindsight, I hated it at the time. I absolutely hated it. I was
Sure.
made class sergeant, and I had to lead the class for 24 weeks or whatever it was. But in hindsight, was thankful for it, and I think it set me up for a lot of success. What's your opinion on why it did you the disservice having a college based
So,
curriculum?
so like I said, mine was very classroom based, very college based. It was built into the community college here. Um, that being said, anybody could join. So you had to do a application. You had to do a background check. You could get flagged saying, hey, there's something on your background that will probably stop you from being employed as a law enforcement officer, but you can complete the course if you'd like. But you have to sign this waiver saying, hey, I'm probably not going to get a job doing this. Now, this school also had a fire academy, an EMS academy, corrections, but it also had like HVAC, mechanics, stuff like that. So I don't know if they did the same for all those academies or because law enforcement was kind of high liability that they did it for them. I don't know. But I didn't have that issue, but several people that I went to the school did. Now, there's kind of a flag for me there going, all right, this person cannot be a cop. Why is he learning how to be a cop? Like that's a flag to me. Whatever. That's probably something I need to take up with someone else. Anyway, so it was not high stress at all. We had a morning formation where we would go out, we would do the Pledge of Allegiance, we'd have to stand at attention, whatever. But what I've learned, especially talking to different cops, there wasn't a morning DT, there wasn't a morning PT. Um, we had a month each of DT and PT, this defensive tactics and physical training, and but they were built into blocks just like you would for college classes. Um, that being said, so you did a pre-test when you started the academy, push-ups, sit-ups, sit and reach, and a run. I think that was it. And I think a high jump. And then at the end of the academy, you did the same thing as a post test. But right in the middle of all that was your PT and DT block. So really, it was not a fair assessment of what you were doing because let's just say you were I was in the best shape of my life when I started the police academy, but then that went to shit for 3-4 months before PT. Then I kind of got back to kind of a base level. Then there were 3 other months after PT, and then we did the post test. So that was not fair at all because like if they were consistent with it, if they broke up those 40 hours or whatever the hours were, um, it would have stayed consistent, whatever. But there was no discipline built into us. The only discipline was when an instructor or someone high ranking gets into a room, you stand up. That was the most of our discipline. No push-ups if you screw up, no getting yelled at, nothing. It was very, very calm, very whatever. It was only when I got hired by my first agency and they had like their own patrol academy, and then you ran every day. You got yelled at for small things like, oh, did someone not do this? And then you got berated and you had to do push-ups. Like, but I wish I would have had that in the academy first to kind of build up, because I'm not from the military. I'm from like the job I had before going to the police academy. I worked for a call center and I was taking people's catalog orders. Like no discipline, no whatever. So as a 24, 25-year-old, that was a new experience for me. But I was still open-minded and I was cool with it. I had no issues with it. But I wish it would have started earlier, especially when you start going through field training and you have a FTO sitting next to you berating you for every little thing. It would have been nice to kind of, instead of being like, wow, this guy's a dick, it would have been nice to have been like, this is expected. This is normal. This is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like now I look back at it and I was like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Now as a 32-year-old individual, I would not respect, like, dude, talk to me like a man. But either way, that's fine. I wish I would have had that more going into it though. Kind of like from what I've learned about the military, like kind of reinventing yourself kind of thing. I think that's important. And you're going to get berated and everything on this job anyway. So to start it from day one, I think that's not a bad idea. It builds your toughness. If nothing else, it builds your toughness.
A little thick skin against all the people that are going to be yelling at you and screaming at you and trying
Right.
to distract you and
And
hijack
I had a
you.
field training officer that said, I can't get you in a shooting every day. Thank God. But I can stress you out every day to see how you respond to that stress. And that was the one that kind of clicked it all for me. Like, I was like, man, why is this guy such a dick? But when he said it like that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Why didn't they say that from day one? Like, hey, we're going to get under your skin, but that's on purpose. But afterwards, no hard feelings. That would have been perfectly fine. But I just didn't have that experience.
It's that again, there's a couple parallels right there that I'll share. Again, before I hit record, we were talking about being in high school bands and we were geeking out on equipment that we use and that sort of stuff in our podcast. But then I also no history in law enforcement, no family, no military. I mean, my dad was in Vietnam, but that was him. Not my thing, and he's very much not an army guy. And I worked at a call center through college. I worked my way through college in a call center doing surveys, and which was a god awful job. And but yeah, same thing. My first day to go to that discipline and kind of shaping and thickening that skin. My first day in my academy, I remember standing there at the door. You're in your suit and whatnot, and that metal door literally gets kicked open by our DT or our TAC officer, as we call him. Who's a former Marine and just screaming at me. And I've never had someone scream at me in my life, right? Like I came out of a corporate job, a mid-level executive, and now I got this guy screaming at me and just berating me for just for existing, right? And I made it through that day. And I remember I went home. I don't know if I've ever told this whole story. I was staying in a hotel because I lived too far away from the agency that picked me up. So I had to like stay in a hotel for a couple of weeks while I did this thing. And I called my girlfriend, now wife, and told her I'd made a horrible mistake, and I started sobbing because it was such a new experience to me, right? And it was so rattling, which was exactly the point of it. And had I not been more fortified in my belief that this was something I wanted to do, I would have quit that day and I would have walked, and they would have, I would have missed out on a career, but also I would have kind of gone back to the way I was and Luckily, I toughed it out, obviously, and learned to deal with that. But I think there's a lot to be said for having some of that. But it's definitely changing. And the last thing I want to do is take my dogma into the latter years of my career, insisting that that's the way to do it. So I always like to hear other people's perspectives
Yeah.
on that.
So my field training experience. So I went through field training twice. The first time I think was a direct reaction to not being properly prepared for the academy. But I went through. So the way my first agency was, it was 3 months classroom, then basically 3 months on the road. Classroom was fine. We had like fighting and stuff, but it was whatever. But then when you get on the road, my first two instructors or my first two FTOs, they were okay. One was a female, and everyone warned me like, dude, she's tough, very strict, blah blah blah, and we got along great. I did fine, no issues. I go to the next guy, brilliant, such a smart guy, old timer. Like when I make my salty day shifter FTO memes, I'm thinking about him every single time. Like just, but so smart. Like he would talk and my brain would like fizzle because there was just so much information just going through. Great guy. Um, and then my third FTO at this point, I get in his car, same thing, brilliant, very smart guy, but very friendly. And I remember clear as day texting to one of my buddies that I went through training with. I said, "Hey, this guy's great. He's like the guy before, but friendlier. He's great." And then I see my DORs, my daily observation report, and I'm failing where I wasn't failing up to this point. I was like, "What the hell just happened? Like we were buddies. What happened?" And it took him like 3 days to address those DORs. That was like probably his one drawback. And he's like, "Hey man, you're doing fine," or not that, but he's like, "You got potential. Just do this, this, and this." And I was like, "What do you mean I'm doing fine? Look at these scores; they're not fine." And me, the way just I act, my confidence got shot and whatever. I ended up, I lasted another 2 months because I got recycled to different people, and I ultimately didn't make it. I had to go back through a year later after a year on our transport unit, and but then that was enough. That was enough for me to be like, you know, finally realizing what they're berating me for, whatever. But I remember being in that third guy's car. We came back from something, and he's like, we came back to the station. He's like, "You need to figure out what you want to do. You're a nice guy, but you're not a cop." And that killed me. I had over a year of skin in the game at this point. The academy and everything. I spent money, blood, sweat, and tears in this. So I go into our evidence room. I'm writing a report for who knows what, and I call my buddy who was a senior officer at the station, and I don't cry, but I was like, dude, what do I do? I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I think I'm meant to do. And he's giving me a pep talk. He's great. All while somebody was behind me, ran back to my FTO and goes, "Hey, this guy's out there. He's calling everybody, crying that you're being mean to him." I was like, and this came back to me like a year later that I found out that this was all rattled or tattled on me. I was like, but the same thing that you had with your girlfriend or wife, it was like, you start questioning all of it. It's like when you really get your stuff tested, you're like, man, is this even worth it? That first year, I got asked so many times, "Is this really what you want to do?" Like to the point of where like it became a joke. Like, dude, stop asking me that. I'm here. Like if I didn't want to do it, I would not be enduring all this crap. I would go work. Like I had a good job where I left. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that it's definitely training in the law enforcement profession is very trying on your patience and your just resilience for sure. But it's needed because that's how rough the road can get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so obviously you kept your sense of humor throughout that whole thing. How has cop work changed your sense of humor from before to after?
I've always been very sarcastic. It's just who I've been. It's always been what I enjoyed. A little bit about me.
You
Not
clearly
many
get along
people.
well with cops then.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. A little bit about me before I got into cop work and everything. I was a film studies major. I wanted to be a filmmaker. Following in suit of like Kevin Smith was my
Okay.
filmmaking idol growing up. Clerks, all that whole thing. Very sarcastic, very like a Jersey sense of humor. I'm from New Jersey,
Yeah.
and so that's just always been my thing. I grew up watching like through those classes, like the Marx Brothers, who are also very sarcastic, stuff like that. So I've always had that. When I was in the academy, there was a guy that I was friends with from Buffalo, New York, and he started making memes of stuff that was happening in class, and he would just send it to the group chat or just show it to me or whatever. I was like, oh, that's funny. He's getting a lot of positive attention from that. I want that. So I got my own meme generator and I started doing my own thing. And that's literally, it started out as a great way just to break the ice,
Hmm.
because when you start anything brand new, whether it's a week-long training or a 6-month academy class or whatever, a new job, the best way to break the ice to me is jokes. Like I remember long time ago, I was at a we were at a concert. Me and my nephews were at a concert, and the concert got rained out or postponed, and we were in this like big like waiting areas. And after a concert, we're in this big indoor waiting area, and I made a meme and I posted on the Facebook group, and people loved it. So I was like, all right, this is going to be my way of connecting with people. So that carried on from the academy to field training to my squad level, and just carried on. And that's kind of through being on the job, it's just kind of gotten more pointed at law enforcement based humor and a little bit more dark and a little bit more edgy. Um, so I think that's kind of how. So I've always been sarcastic. I think it's just got way more pointed at this point.
The other thing, another consistency or another like parallel between us, but also something you talk about a lot, you use a lot, is your relationship to music, and
Mm-hmm.
how that has also been something that's been cathartic for you. You've had some great episodes of Punk Rock Cops with other cops on who come from a say a different, what's the word I'm looking for, a different lineage than
Mm-hmm.
say the standard, like maybe up through the military or want to be a cop, but like kind of came to the job in a very punk rock way.
Yeah,
As we're talking right now, I swear I see a Descendants tattoo on your forearm, which is
I do.
awesome.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that's one of the things we've connected on. We've joked about a lot of the same bands. We're both very much into the same kinds of punk and those bands and ska and Less Than Jake and other bands like that. Um, music, I came out of music. I was a music executive when I decided to be a cop, and that's where I was. And I was about to make vice president at my record label when I bounced, which some days it was a horrible decision, and other days it was a
Right.
great decision. But nonetheless, music has always been a theme in my life, and it's always been one of those things that I find a lot of solace in, and that I go back to over and over and over again. Whether I'm in a good mood or a bad mood or an okay mood or I need a mood boost or whatever it is. But how has music played a role in managing? And it's I'll narrow the question down from saying in your life to saying how has music uh, played a role in helping you navigate some of the stress and then later the trauma that this job thrust upon you?
Sure. So the first part of it, in high school, so I'll go broad and I'll come to the pinpoint. The first part is that when I was in high school, I was in musical theater, something like nobody knows. But I think I was in like elementary school, and I got casted for a school play or whatever, and I was like, again, that positive feedback. So I was like, I like this. So, but because of that, because of the musical theater, I was like, man, music relates to so much of a scenario. And then you kind of tie that into filmmaking. And so many movies have a soundtrack that goes with the scenario. So I've always listened to music and tried to attribute it to something in my life, whether it be something creative that I'm doing or my life. Excuse me. So as I move through life, like I was in a band for only a couple of years, but it feels like it was significantly longer. But I've always had music that I kind of went to. And for me, there's always a song or a band or something for every occasion, whether it be, happy, sad, whatever. Um, so because of that, I kind of always draw back to what I've known or whatever. I kind of listen to the same bands that I listened to 10 years ago. I still listen today. Actually, today, as I was driving, I was listening to Real Big Fish a lot. Um, so just kind of going with that. Um, and that's kind of even like in my podcast, at least one song, because I put like 3 or 4 songs in throughout the episode, at least one song has to do with the topic that we talk about. Just because I think everybody has a way that things speak to them, whether it's words like you and me. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes it's art specifically. Sometimes it's other mediums. Um, but sometimes you don't necessarily hear, like if you and me speaking, people may not hear it, but if you put a song to it, it might hit them. Like maybe the key that the song is being played in, major or minor, it might hit them. And for me, the way I am, I can kind of put them all together. Whether I'm feeling a way, saying something out loud, and then I hear a song, and it kind of all puts it all together. So I just always rely on music, whether I'm just driving in my car or just at the gym. Like music has always just been literally the soundtrack to my life, where I always try to find a song or a band that can kind of transcend the whole situation. This Descendants tattoo, just because you brought it up, has a specific meaning. My buddy was killed in the line of duty last year, and before he passed away, before the incident, he went to Denver, Colorado. The Descendants were playing an anniversary show out there with Rise Against, and out of nowhere, like we talked about Rise Against and the Descendants and whatever, out of nowhere he bought me a Descendants T-shirt, and I still have it. It doesn't really fit as well anymore, but I have it. So when he passed away, everyone was getting tattoos for him, and I was like, I need something specific for me. I have tattoos all over my body, well, not my arms, for different people that I've lost, but they're all specific to me and them. So um, before I moved to my new agency, I was like, I need to get this tattoo. So I got the Descendants for that T-shirt that he got for me, and Milo kind of looks like him a little bit. So I got that, and that was just, again, when you meet someone who has the same kind of taste as you on the job, and that was one of the things that connected us. We had the same kind of music taste. I mean, that just solidified. It reminds me of Step Brothers. Like, did we just become best friends? Like that kind of thing. So, whenever I find someone who likes the same kind of music as me, like one of my FTOs, he was like, "Oh, you like Yellow Card?" I was like, "Yes, I do." And he was like, "I played with them when they were just a junk band from Jacksonville." That began a friendship, stuff like that. So that's what the Descendants tattoo is about.
That's a great story. And again, another parallel. I saw Rise Against and the Descendants on that same tour.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm actually from Denver, and I came very close to going to that show.
Really?
And going home for it, and which would have been kind of a weird touch point.
Yeah, that one. So they played separately. I know which tour you're talking about. They played separately to that. It was like a one-off show for this anniversary thing they were doing. Then last summer, a year ago, basically, they played up here in St. Augustine, and me and my girlfriend, we all went because my buddy was still in the hospital at that point. And it was Rise Against, Descendants. There was a third band that I can't remember at this time, but anyway, the Menzingers, who's another big band I like.
Yeah.
And we were late to the show, so I heard Menzingers from the parking lot, or not the Menzingers. I heard Descendants from the parking lot, which sucks because they're getting older. They're probably not going to tour much longer. But I did see Rise Against, which the last time I saw them was with Linkin Park years ago. Another
tour,
another insane show. Just an amazing tour. But so it's kind of funny because I'm like, man, every time I try to see Rise Against, something bad happens, but it's okay.
I want to stay on music just for one more second.
Yeah.
I want to, because I think in one of your episodes,
music.
I know you and I could easily talk about this. Like, we easily have some of the same favorite bands, and I think we both connect with music in the same way.
I feel like when you get people who like the same kind of music, you'd be like, hey, you know this band? Yeah. Oh, that's a great band. Okay, you know this band? Oh, and you just keep doing it.
After the riots and unrest of the summer of 2020, I began to get increasingly concerned about the fact there's so much of my life that is out there accessible to the public. And yes, I know that I'm a public figure in some sort of way, but even then, it still makes me uncomfortable. And I've been trying to figure out where the line should be drawn between what is shared on this podcast or on social media or in interviews I give and what should remain private for the security and safety of my family. Even though I'm a public person, that doesn't mean I want my personal information out there for the bad guys to find. I've arrested enough of them in my career that it makes me nervous to think that my family could be exposed to those dangers. Not long ago, a suspect showed up at the front door of my partner's house, 45 miles away from the station. I've had enough of worrying about it and felt completely outmatched by the internet. I mean, it's the internet. Trying to take my name off of Google seems insurmountable, and I learned that, honestly, it is. But there's a lot that we can do to protect ourselves, and that's removing our names from people's search sites and breaking the links between our home address and our names. I learned all this from my friends at officerprivacy.com, who are helping me to clean up my side of the internet. A quick Google search shows just a shocking amount of information about where I live, where I used to live, my family members, their names, their addresses, and even phone numbers. We need help protecting ourselves from the bad guys. You have partners on your beat, so get a partner on the internet. To learn more about how they can keep you safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get a free USB data blocker, and your first month of monitoring is free. That's officerprivacy.com/the squad room. I want to touch on something I thought was really interesting about punk rock and cops, because you've done it, like I said, you've done episodes on this, but explain real briefly, like this, I guess you could call it a theory of what kind of cop comes into cop work out of the punk rock scene. Can you extrapolate on that a little?
Well, I think it's crazy because when you think of punk rock music, it's anti-authoritarian, right? So
Yep.
it's not. So to hear that someone grew up in the punk scene and is now a cop, it just doesn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense.
Right.
But if you look at everything that's going on, kind of makes more sense because like the cops are kind of the anti-culture right now. Like to be a law enforcement officer, it's against the mainstream thought process. So it's kind of weird. But you know, I've had 2 episodes now called Punk Rock Cops in my podcast, and actually we're starting a Punk Rock Cop series that we're going to be doing. But basically, what I've noticed, so I've talked to 2 guys in both of those episodes. BC Sanders is a cop from like somewhere in the Carolinas, and then we got my buddy Dave from Indiana. Both are in their like 40s, I think, so really old school, crusty punks, and they still live, breathe, and die punk rock. And they basically said like punk rock made me accept everybody for who they are. Like it doesn't matter if you are white, black, straight, bi, gay, Christian, nothing. You're here for the music. You're here for a common purpose. And when you have that mentality and you translate it to law enforcement, it really makes sense. Like, you know, I hate the whole Black Lives Matter idea because I've always thought, no, everybody matters. And that's literally what punk rock is saying. Like, if you think about like the skinhead movement of like the 80s, 90s, where it was like got kind of neo fascist, everyone was like, no, that's not what this is about. This is about community. This is about being one with everybody. Literally, two-tone ska is about black and white mixing together. All those mentalities in music, if you have, I mean, not saying that if you don't listen to those music, you don't have that mentality, but by having those mentalities built into something that you do for fun, and then you're going to start going to a profession that you get paid for, it kind of just, it makes sense. Like, of course I'm going to treat everybody as equal because we are equal. Like if you're sweating and snotting on me in a mosh pit, then of course I'm going to treat you the same way if we're out in the streets. Everybody of those 2 guys specifically, because I've spoken to them, you know, race, creed, color, religion doesn't matter. They treat everybody at face value. How you come up to me, respect given is respect earned. And you know, they're just genuine people. And I feel like now that because I've made those episodes, more punk rock cops have come out of the woodwork and like, hey, I grew up listening to this. I grew up whatever. And you know, everybody has the same message. It's like, yeah, I chose non-mainstream music because I didn't agree with that. I wanted something more pure and genuine. And that's what you get when I'm on the road, is someone pure and genuine. I'm not going to give you, you know, that same grunt style rhetoric that you'd hear on Fox News. I'm going to give you the real deal. If I don't agree, whatever it might be. And it's really an interesting movement that I'm glad that those episodes have kind of got people out of there, because now that more people are talking, they're like, wow, this is normal.
Yeah. I think that's a great explanation for it. I got nothing to add to that. I think
I'm just happy that people are realizing it. Like, even if you don't like the music, because like even like modern day, I try to get my nephews into it, and they're more into like modern pop punk and whatever it might be, but they understand the idea. Like, I was like, you got to understand where this music came from. It came from like, either the disco era or the prog rock era where everyone was pretentious and like, no, this is the best. It's like, nah, dude, we're all just hanging out together. Like that's I did a class in college about music, and I was like, you got to understand why this music exists. Same with like reggae or ska,
Hmm.
even when it started. And I was like, if you transcend that to just life, it makes so much more sense. Like, instead of being pretentious like the prog rock group, like not everybody can be Russian, yes, but everybody can be the Descendants. Everyone can just be noisy in a freaking basement,
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's what got me into that side of music anyway.
I think for me, when I at least back, when I started podcasting was very much like the punk rock version of communicating in a mass media kind of environment,
Mhm.
right? Like it was a very small group of people who were doing it. People barely knew what podcasts were. There were only a handful of big ones out there already, and so you're just out there like trying to connect with people who have a similar mindset or similar ethos, and it's growing. Obviously it's exploding now, and now corporations are coming in and creating networks, podcast networks, and podcast companies, and and it's becoming its own beast now. But there's still this very punk rock element of podcasting, which
Yeah.
is, you and I both know this, and anyone else, like the secrets, it's not a secret. You go down to Best Buy and you buy a microphone and you plug it into your computer, and there are free hosting services to start, and you just start. And that is literally the same. That is as punk rock of a communication medium as you can get,
Yeah.
because it again, it's like, like punk rock. Can you get three chords? Can you get three chords, and let's go? And maybe two. Maybe we'll just do it two, and we'll just play real
Yeah.
loud.
Yeah,
So,
that's amazing that you brought that up because I still to this day operate under the DIY mentality. Like I record, produce, edit, and publish all my stuff by myself. I just do it. It all started from like, hey, let's see what my friends think, and then more people started listening, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Um, Even I've tried to figure out how I can sell merchandise at conferences or trade shows or whatever, and literally someone was like, well, if you run a table, what are you going to do? I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to load my t-shirt boxes in my car. I'm going to drive to the gig, set up, and I'm going to go home. What do you mean? Which is totally what I used to do for rock shows. Like we would load up our merch, we'd load up our gear, we'd go there, we'd set up, and then we go home. Like no, nothing fancy. Like pay me gas to get there, and I'll be happy. Um, I've said that too, and I've looked at kind of the mainstream podcasters. Like if you look at Joe Rogan or any of the other ones, which is crazy because like iHeartRadio had a podcast awards last year, I think, and he wasn't even mentioned. So that's just an idea of like what mainstream really is. But I see Joe Rogan as like the ABC of podcasting, right? And you look at other ones like I said this the other day. I don't know if I actually published it or if I was just ranting to myself, but like Mike the Cop and his thing, that's kind of like the cops or the live PD. And then as you go further and further down the tiers, then you got me. I'm just the crusty punk kid that hopes someone listens to my stuff and likes it. Like that's really, and it's crazy that you said that podcasting was and kind of is like the most because literally everybody can do this. People message me all the time. How do you start a podcast? I'm like, press record. That's how. Like, or like, what do I need? You got a laptop? Yes, you got it. Or if you have a
right.
phone, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's obviously very cool. And then you end up with, having great conversations, meeting connections like this. Um, I want to ask about, you mentioned it earlier, but obviously it created a big shift in your life, and a lot of decisions that came after it. But the line of duty death of your friend Jason,
Mhm.
um, can you, you don't have to go into necessarily great detail about what happened. I mean, the fact was he was killed in the line of duty. He was shot, and um, but I'm curious about what your experience was in those moments. He was a very close friend of yours,
Yeah.
and what are the things you did, good or bad, to navigate those first couple of, say, months after that? And in hindsight, were there things you could do to take better care of yourself, or did you do it the right way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have, and I would if you wanted. I go full into detail. I feel like every time I talk about it is just a little bit more therapy. But um, so long story short, my buddy Jason got basically ambushed in the line of duty. He checked out with a vehicle at an apartment complex where we had a lot of shootings and drug related activity. He checked out with some random vehicle, um, got the guy out of the car, says, "Hey, what are you doing?" The guy, small struggle, and the guy shoots him in the face. Um, 55 days later, he passes away from his injuries. Now, um, while he was in the hospital and still kind of trying to survive, um, I took 2 weeks off from work, which my agency was kind of like, take as much time as you need, no big deal. The first week, and now looking back at it, my 2 weeks was not enough. I was still in shock when I said, "Oh no, I'm good." I was still in shock, but my initial reaction the night of the shooting, I was probably one of the first 10 people on scene. I say I'm about the fourth person on scene, but um, one of the first people. Um, we're looking for the guy. The guy's long gone at that point. I text my sister at some point within that first couple hours saying, like, I'm done. Like, this shit ain't worth it anymore. Like, I've had guys shot in the line of duty at my agency. I've had people die in neighboring agencies based on different incidents. But the first time that someone I knew personally literally was going to hang out with the night before, lying on the pavement, that was an eye opener. And she was like, "Hey, whatever you need to do, I support." Cool. But I got EAP information from my command staff and everything. And ultimately, I was like, that's an emotional decision. I'm going to give it some time. I'm going to wait till I'm not thinking so emotionally. I want to think more rationally. And time went, time went. I did. It was a terrible time because I had a therapist at the time. He was on vacation, so I couldn't go talk to him. So I took the EAP therapist they gave me. I had 2 meetings with her. It was really kind of going in the right direction, and then she caught COVID, so she couldn't see any patients. So I was just kind of sitting, doing my own thing. I was like, "What do I do now?" At the same time, my sister she didn't even get sick. She had an asthma attack. She was in a coma for a week, and she ended up passing away. All while this is all going on, and through all that, kind of again, no therapist or anything to talk to, just my own people around me. Jason passed away August 17th, which was, I don't know, 2 weeks before I moved away. I started the new agency, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna keep trucking forward, whatever. Which, we're past the year mark of all this now, and I've been looking at my Facebook memories, and I was like, I totally forgot that happened. I forgot that happened. I forgot that I went to work for a certain amount of time. Like, my mind totally blocked all that out because it was just insignificant to me. So that being said, what would I do differently? I would have taken more time off instantly. But I felt so bad at the end of those 2 weeks, going, man, my squad wants me to get back. Like, they think I'm loafing it. None of them thought that way, but that's what I thought. A lot of people, when they take time off for an injury or whatever it might be, everyone's like, oh man, what's the squad thinking of me? It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's what you think. Like, are you ready or not? Whatever. But I think I needed to get back because of just boredom in my mind, just needed activity. I wish my command staff would have been like, all right, cool. This is someone significant to you. Here's some desk duty. Here's some whatever. No big deal. I actually don't fault them for that because I'm sure they didn't know any better either. But that kind of goes with the culture of mental health and stuff that agencies need to be a little bit more well aware of. But then when I went to my new agency, I was in their patrol academy for about a month and found out that another one of my buddies ended up taking his life. He was the first on scene to Jason, battled with tremendous PTSD and some other personal demons, and he ended up taking his life. To me, that was the final straw. Because with Jason, I was like, all right, I'm going to continue working for Jason. I'm going to keep, pushing forward. Even with my sister, I was like, all right, she wasn't a cop or anything, but no problem. I got this. I think, honestly, I'm still in a little bit of denial about her because it was just so sudden and unexpected. But when my buddy Pat took his own life and I found out about it, I was in shock for the whole weekend. And I went back to training on Monday, and I was sitting at lunch in the break room, and I saw there was like a flyer above a copy machine or whatever. It said something about like, do you have PTSD? Don't feel free to, don't feel ashamed to talk or something like that. For some reason, that just clicked with me, and I was like, huh. And I remember driving to the next training location, and I text my girlfriend, and she worked nights. And I was like, we need to talk. I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm not with this anymore. And I talked to my training cadre because I had to ask them for permission to go to my buddy's funeral later in the week, which would be the third funeral I've went to in 3 months. And, that's where it all kind of broke down. And to me, when Jason got hurt, my initial reaction was anger. I was angry at everything. Angry at the people that we served. How could you let this happen? Angry at the people that I worked with. How could we let this happen? Stuff like that. Um, so we did a debrief that night, kind of like, how's everyone doing? Everyone okay? Blah blah blah. And then they're like, all right, like, because cops don't talk, right? So they're like, all right, if no one has anything to say, you guys can go 10-8. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm 10-8. I was the first one to get on the radio and say, hey, I'm going, send me a call. That was some noise complaint, people playing loud music in their neighborhood. And I was like, fuck those people. I was like, fuck them, fuck their loud music, fuck all this. And then one of our sergeants was like, no, 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 you're not servicing that call. Get back to the station. And I'm glad he did that. But, it's just, I've noticed, because I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of people on that squad that night don't work there anymore for one reason or another. Obviously, my one buddy passed away. Somebody quit. A couple people quit. Some people got fired. And it's all like, all right, everything that's been done, was that in reference to the trauma that we all endured when our buddy went down? Probably. And that's why mental health has become such a big deal to me. Up until my buddy passed funeral, including his, I went to 3 cop funerals for PTSD, for suicide. And one was a sergeant nearby. I was one of the first on scene for that. One was a detective nearby that I've worked with, and then my buddy. And I was like, man, this isn't right. Why are we losing so many cops to this? And that's where I made the decision. I was like, to me, I literally said, this shit ain't worth it. Like, as much as I love this, well, I don't love this community. This community exists. It's my employer. These people matter way more to me, and I matter more to me. So that's why I said to the chief that I didn't feel it anymore. So I mean, there was so much that built up to that, even in that moment. But it's just those traumatic experiences. It's just, there's so much that goes into it, and not even that, but like so much stuff that went into it before that night that kind of came to a head that night too.
One of the things that I saw from kind of a distance, when you finally shared that you had decided to leave a sworn position and move to a civilian position in dispatch, was a lot of vitriol or snark about he couldn't cut it. And I thought you handled it very well. And I've seen others in like a social media space who have some sort of influence or have an audience and have said, you know what, this is no longer for me. I need to, for my own sake, back away, try something different for a little bit. And the vitriol that comes out is like, oh, you couldn't hack it, you couldn't handle it. And were you surprised by that? I have a whole bunch of questions around that, but I guess, were you surprised by that, or was it kind of consistent with what you see in our profession?
So when I was going back to that FTO story I told, the third one I had that was kind of hard on me, um, he said, when I was with him, when I was in his car, we had a disturbance or whatever. There was a male and a female, and the male was just being annoying. He was trying to interrupt what the female was talking about, and I would just ignore him. I was just like, dude, go away. I didn't even, thinking of like dealing with a child. Like when a child's annoying, you ignore him, he goes away, right? He's not getting the attention he wants, he disappears, or he stops doing what he's doing. After that call, the my FTO goes, why did you not engage in that male that was trying to interrupt your scene? And I said exactly what I just said to you. I said, I tried to ignore him so he would go away. So he would stop trying to because we were trying to get information out of a hysterical female. I was trying to ignore him. Not to mince words, I said I tried to ignore him so he would go away. Those words. He goes, "Is that what you're going to do when you deal with any kind of threat? Going to ignore it and hope it goes away? Are you going to cry? Are you going to start like belittling me, right?" And he's like, "Are you a coward? Is that what you have? Are you going to, like, if someone starts shooting at you, you're going to ignore it so it goes away?" Like, literally starts breaking me down. I'm like, none of this is what I said. Whatever. So this guy starts calling me a coward left and right. So he's like, "Listen, if you quit because you're a coward, there's no shame in that. Just let me know and I'll drop you off at the station." It's like, no shame. You just called me a coward, but that wasn't even on my mind. When fast forward to this past October, when I did step aside, that was what was in my head. If I step aside, I'm a coward, because that's just what it was. And literally none of that had anything to do with my decision. Like, I remember the moment Jason went down, I had just taken an arrest. I had just excuse me, I had just dropped him off at the prisoner transport wagon. And I didn't even care about my paperwork. I popped my Tahoe and drive and just went. And just, ran out, gun out. I was ready to shoot the first fucker that stepped in my face. I was ready. No cowardness. I didn't even think of it, right? And literally we stopped a guy who was matching the description at the time. And I was ready to just do unthinkable things to this guy, right? There was no cowardice. I was hunting. Fast forward a year or a few months, but that was in my head. I was like, man, if I don't continue this job, I'm a coward. And even my training cadre, they're like, no. He's like, if you mentally don't feel good enough to continue, you're not a coward. If anything, you're brave because you're realizing that you come first. So between him and a couple other mental health resources I had, I comfortably made that decision. But it was not an easy decision, right? Like, I kind of kicked it back and forth. Even sitting in dispatch, I was like, this is such it's an insult to me. Everything I've done over the past 6 years, the shit I got into, the dangers that I really faced, this is nothing. This is bullshit. I shouldn't be here. So was I expecting that? Yes, because my FTO said it. I was thinking it. Of course, someone else is going to say it. To be fair, I've had more positive reactions than good. More people have been supportive and been like, because now that, mental health is really starting to blossom as like a area of study for law enforcement. And so a lot of people are like, dude, it's way better for you to take care of yourself if you're not there than to be there not be there mentally and then get yourself or somebody else hurt, which is really where I was at. But was I expecting like crusty people to be like, "Oh, this kid just couldn't cut it"? Absolutely. I hate the phrase, "Oh, this job isn't for everybody." Stop. I agree. This job is not for everybody. It's very much for me, but I burnt out super early, which has a lot to do with the way I started my career. That's why I tell people, like, don't eat every overtime that comes up your first 5 years. Like, it's people said it all the time and I never listened to them. It's a marathon, not a race. I was like, yeah, whatever you're saying. But between the burn down from the overtime, the burnout from prosecutors that didn't do their job, all that stuff, plus losing my buddies over bullshit, that was what I said enough is enough for. So was I expecting it? Yes. It's gotten to the point with me now when people, like, I get messages every once in a while like, "Did I hear you're a dispatcher? That's so fucking weak." It's like, dude, I don't fucking care. Like, it does. It gets, obviously I just restated it, so it's still in there. But I know that me personally, I'm happier. I know that I can clock out at the end of the night, go home, and have a clear brain of like no stress whatsoever. And that's important to me. If a dispatcher screws up, yeah, I could be held liably civilly, criminally, same things as a cop, right? Except I'm not having a gun pointed at my face, which is fine. I really don't, I mean, no one wants a gun pointed at their face, but I was okay with that risk on the road. But we always say, is the juice worth the squeeze? To me, the juice wasn't worth it anymore. So that's where I made that decision. Um, just to kind of wrap that up, I've talked to a bunch of social media guys or guys that are on social media that have stepped aside, which is crazy. The moment people start getting a side hustle in this thing is when they start going like, maybe I'll step aside. But they all kind of had the same thing. Like, listen, the job is good. I'm one of those people that think that the job is meant for certain people. The people that become law enforcement officers, the guy that's working at Dairy Queen right now, they cannot be a cop. It takes a special kind of person. That being said, it's still a job and it's going to exist before, during, and after you're there. So don't make that, oh, it's a calling. It's my calling. Don't make that be your decision maker.
Hmm. That's great advice, and it's stuff I wish I had known some of those same lessons early on, that it's a sprint, or that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and to not invest so much of your identity in that
That's
job.
the
And yes,
biggest
it's
thing.
yeah, and you can have a really strong sense of purpose, and you can get a whole ton of meaning out of the job, but if you make it your identity,
Right.
that is where we now have basically, plunged ourselves underwater, when
Right.
it comes
Because
to.
then when you get out of it, you're like, shit, who am I? And
Mhm,
that's where I kind of was too. Is like, we make
mhm.
fun of it, I do in my memes, but like the guys with the thin blue lines on their trucks and everything. And like, y'all are acting like the Power Rangers. Like the Power Rangers, if you were the red Power Ranger, all you did was wear red Power Ranger stuff or, red shirts and everything. That's the same stuff with these thin blue line punishers, right? They're wearing that shit and they're like, this is me. And I've got a thing that says sheepdog on my car, but I never identified with it to that extent. But I've got enough Relentless Defender T-shirts to clothe an entire nation or whatever. But for sure, and I think, this came up somewhere else where it's like I think the last 3 years kind of did a disservice to us with that, where because the cops were the bad guys and we're all cops and we're trying to be like, no, we're not the bad guys. So we kind of pontificate that a little extra and be like, no, I'm a good guy. Look, I'm wearing the thin blue line and I'm a nice guy. That's kind of where it got a little overboard. And so you have these guys, these new people who are, they started representing the thin blue line as like, hey, no, we're good. Like, I'm a nice guy. Look, that's the whole humanizing the badge idea. But then it became their personalities. And I don't know because my dad was a cop 10, 20 years before I was born, but I guarantee you in the 1970s, he was not walking around the streets of New Jersey rocking a thin blue line anywhere. I don't even think the thin blue line existed then. And it's just like, all right, maybe we need to step it back just a little bit. Like, you can be proud of what you do. I sure was. Like, when I think about my old stories, but it's not who you are, it's what you do.
Yeah, and that's for anyone who's listening, who's at the beginning of their career, that will be the takeaway I hope you get from this episode, is maintaining your sense of identity outside of the job. And if you can do that when you come into the job, that's great. And if you have to do it once you're in the job and you have to go re-find yourself like I did, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That is a slog.
Yeah.
And to be able to go out, or go back rather, and dissect and basically remove yourself from this identity of just being a cop, or that was your thing, and returning to the person who you truly are, all the things you can't leave behind, that's a process that's really, really challenging, and I don't really wish for anybody.
Right.
So if we can,
And I thought I was really good at it. Like,
me too.
you
I
know,
thought, I
I,
didn't realize it.
yeah. Like I hated watching cop shows and movies when I was off duty. I never wore my Relentless Defender shirts off duty. Um, stuff like that, and I was like,
Mhm.
I'm the good. This job isn't eating me up. Little did I know, me working 2 weeks straight of either overtime gigs or regular patrol duties, plus always checking my work email, trying to see what's going on and knowing what bolos are coming out and whatever. All those little things, those, you know, hyper vigilant things, like, we think of hyper vigilant of being like always sitting with your back, you know, away from the door or whatever. I think that is too, don't get me wrong. But I think of like Emotional Survival, the
Mhm.
book by Kevin Go Martin.
Yep.
That was written what I think in the 90s or early 2000s. I think he needs
2000 or
to
2002.
Yeah, he needs to revamp it because now with social media and emailing and text messaging and stuff like that, we are now always indulge in this. Just like when kids get bullied, right? Like back in the day, we would get bullied at school, we'd go home, and that was it. The bullies would go away. But now they get bullied on social media 24/7. Same idea with police work. We get inundated with it. We're stuck in the news, especially when the cops were part of the news cycle. And it's like you need to literally detach from all of it, but in a healthy way. And necessarily not having a Facebook isn't a healthy way to do it because a Facebook or Instagram, that's just kind of part of normal life now. Social media is just kind of accepted. I don't know the result of it, but we really need to find a way to balance all of that. Like you can enjoy this job and be proud of what you do and still have a normal life. I haven't figured out the balance, obviously, but I think that's kind of what this new generation, if you're listening, is listening to. It needs to be like, all right, I need to find that balance, and work life balance will keep you alive. I mean,
I think the new generation gets it. They grew up with these concepts,
right?
and I experience it as a lieutenant now with younger officers coming in. Like they self advocate so much better than my generation did,
Yeah.
and they are not they don't get hooked or get take the bait on the do it for the good of the agency or we need you or
Right. There's
you're
not
part of the
many like
team.
company men anymore or women.
Right. And they go, my weekends are mine. And it's important to me that I have my time off because I have my other interests and I encourage that. And then,
Right.
but I never had that sense. I was the guy who was like, I mean, there's always people who work far harder than you or more time than you. Um, but I always thought, yeah, I'm devoted to the agency or I've got to do what I've got to do because I'm a cop. And I didn't self advocate for that time nearly as much as I should have. And man, it would have been a culture shock at the time. What I found for me, just because you're sharing your experience, what I found in my identity was straight out of Kevin Gilmartin's book. And the first time I read that book, I thought, oh, those poor bastards, that must suck to be one of
Yeah.
them. And the second time I read it, went, oh crap, I think it's me.
Yeah.
Was early in my career, I had my kids early in my career, so I was starting this new job, this new career, absolutely loved it. Would work a little bit here and there, but also because the kids are at home and my wife works, was trying to balance that. But between those things, all of the other parts of me went away. The things that were that I considered to be the additionals or the get to haves, like playing golf or going mountain biking or even exercising. Sometimes all those things went away slowly but surely, and all that I had left was home life with young kids or being a cop. And when I was a cop, of course, you come home and you bring that hypervigilance home that you just talked about, and you've got zero energy left. And by the time I realized that there was a hole I now needed to start digging myself out of, um, I was spent. I had nothing left in the tank,
Mhm.
and that was the process for me. So it's not even working the ton of overtime and wearing I was like you. I don't wear the shirts. I don't have the stickers. I intentionally kept my friends who weren't cops, but those kind of drifted away as I'm working 4 months on night shift on the weekends, and they're at work during the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, those things we need to be very, very aware of as we go through our career, and we have to fight for them. We really have to be aware that those things will go away if we don't fight for them. And that is something I hope
It's
people understand.
it's something that I'm kind of dealing with now, because I'm trying to maintain that work life balance at my new agency. So while I like the people I work with, I don't want them to be my only friends. I don't want because and everyone listening knows that when cops get together or whatever off duty, what do they talk about 90% of the time is work and cop shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like my buddy Jason called me the shift mom when we worked together because I would organize like our choir practices. I'd be like, hey, we're going to have dinner at this place, then we're going to get drinks, whatever. 90% of that time is work stuff, which is not terrible because you need to let that steam out in a safe place. But it's also not good because that's all you're talking about. There's no like, hey, how's your wife? How's your, hey, you see that new show on Netflix or whatever. It's just all, man, fuck Sergeant so and so, whatever it might be. Um, so now my new agency, I try to maintain friendly relationships, obviously for working purposes, but we don't hang out off duty or anything. But my friends that I made at my old agency, now that I've been apart from them for a year, we really, our conversations, they're much more tried, and it's like, what do you talk about besides cop stuff? And then it's where it's like, shit, are we friends or are we just convenient coworkers? And to go back to what you were saying about, maintaining friends outside the job, that's super hard, especially over the past several years where like everyone for some reason had to be divisive. Like you're either pro cop or anti cop. There's no in between. Not like this guy fucked up, but this guy is cool. There's none of that. Um, so you're right. It's very important to have your non cop balance, but it's very difficult for sure.
Very difficult. But it's, again, there's burgeoning resources. There's lots of information out there. There's a new movement, like you said earlier, towards accepting these things. And actually your new decision, your biggest, most recent decision is to be part of that shift.
Mhm.
And you just went back to school. That's a huge decision.
Yeah.
What are you getting? What are you studying, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
So I have just today would start week number 2 of my degree in psychology. Um, I realized having gone through a couple critical incident debriefs that the psychology field is important, but it's not very culturally aware of what law enforcement is about. Because if you have someone who specializes in trauma, there's a lot of times they're specialized in like sexual assault trauma or like abusive parent trauma,
Right.
but not necessarily law enforcement or combat trauma. And even so, even if they're combat trauma certified or like specialized, that's different than law enforcement trauma because if you're away on a deployment, you're there for several months to a year or whatever it might be. You come back, and what you dealt with wherever you dealt with it is not there. But if you're a law enforcement officer, you deal with two 12-hour shifts. You go home for your 2 hour or your 2 days off, and then you're back in it. But you're literally within the same community, whether it be same city, same county, whatever.
Right.
And the bad guy looks a lot like you. Like it literally, you know what I mean? Like the guy that could jump out you on a traffic stop is the same guy that could be, taking
Right.
your money at the grocery store. Um, so it's significant and it's different. So after my buddy passed away, my buddy Pat, and I realized that mental health and counseling was just underserved in the law enforcement capacity. I was like, I kind of looked at my career and I realized that like my career has always been about helping people. And this goes back like 7 or 8 years ago when I was working for a corporate company. And I was like, I don't want to make this guy money. I don't care about this guy. I want to help people. And so that's why I joined the police academy. And I realized, or at least where my mind is right now, is that I want to help the cops. I want to help the good guys. I want to help, like maybe my mind is not out for helping the community at large anymore. Maybe, maybe that's burnt out. I don't know. Maybe it's forever. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But I I want to help law enforcement officers because I understand the job. I've experienced different trauma levels of it, and at the very least, I can relate to just the job in general. Because when you have a critical incident debrief and the guy tries to call you out, like we had a guy involved in a shooting or his buddy got shot or whatever, and he literally said he was like, "Listen, I was in combat in Iraq. I saw my best friend get blown up in front of me. This didn't really do anything to me." And for the counselor to go, well, what would your daughters think about that? Whoa, 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 whoa. We don't need to even touch any of that. Like that's a big red flag to me. Um, it needs to be there because, that gentleman that I was just talking about, he was involved in a critical incident later. So what if that was because he was underserved in the other incident? And, I don't, I've lost, like I said, I've lost 3 people that I personally known close to me to PTSD or mental health related injuries. I don't want to lose any more. And at the very minimum, I don't want other people to lose people either. Since I've kind of come out about mental health and counseling and things like that, I've had people reach out, say, "Hey, I lost a friend of mine last night or the other day. he turned his gun on himself, whatever it might be. Or, hey, I sought counseling because you said something about it. Just saying shit like that, to be the advocate for that, was enough for me. And even when I get frustrated that Instagram kind of silences my shit, just to hear that once is enough for me to be like, all right, I'm going to keep posting this and hope that people get some value out of it. My hope is that it's a long road, to get a master's in counseling or whatever it might be. It's a long road, but at the very end of it, if people can come to me and be inspired to keep fighting, and that's what I'm all about. So that's kind of what I made the decision for, and that's kind of as I start the very beginnings of all this. That's as the term papers start piling up, that'll be like, listen, this is for the greater good. This is for the greater good.
Well, I think you've been serving the greater good for a long time, Charlie, with just the humor and shedding some brevity and some lightness onto some very heavy topics and also some very heavy times in a very heavy job. And this new path towards being a culturally competent counselor, which I think is incredibly important, is just, kind of, for me, it seems like it's just the next phase of your path, but it's obvious you've been on that path for a long time to me. So thank you for what you do. Please don't stop with the memes. I know grad school is going to get very heavy and all that, but I need something to chuckle at during my day. And I always go to your stuff first to find something funny and new. So thank you for that. Thank you for the laughs you've given me, for the conversations about, all the different bands and all that sort of stuff. I just enjoy all of it. And thanks for being with us today. Where can people find out more about you in the rare event they already don't know about you?
Well, thank you very much for everything you just said. I really appreciate it. I'm on a couple different platforms. I'm on Instagram is the main thing I post on, just because I hate bouncing around to different apps. So Instagram is at 108 spelt out _memes, MEMES. And then I have a podcast. If you go to wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you're listening to this, type in the 108 podcast and it should pop up. We are actually this. I don't know when this is going to air, but in the first week of October, I'm going to start season 3 of my podcast, and that's going to be completely focused on mental health, resiliency, personal growth, kind of straying away from just the cop stories. While they're still good and all in the cop content, I'm more focused on bettering people and stuff like that. So whether it be this is inspired by my buddy Ben, also from Indiana, but focusing on physical, mental, and financial health, as well as humor, trying to put all those together and do a podcast weekly for it. So you can check that out, 108 Podcast. I have a store with t-shirts, stickers, coasters, a whole bunch of different crap. 10-8-memes.ecwid.com. What else? I'm on like Facebook, Truth Social, Twitter. I don't really post on all those, but I'm there if you want to find me. And but Instagram is the way to go. So if you don't have Instagram, try those other ones. But I'm definitely heavy on Instagram.
And we'll put links in the show notes too for people so they can find those if
awesome.
If they can just click the link in the show notes for this episode. Charlie, thanks so much for a great conversation. Lots of fun to see the parallels. Despite our age difference, you are indeed an old soul, like you said at the very beginning of our conversation, and great having you today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're new to the show, make sure you check through our catalog of episodes because you're going to find some amazing guests and some great actionable ideas you can take into your day. Also, I want to offer you something I'm very excited about, and it's absolutely free. It's my Tactical Tuesday newsletter. Every Tuesday, I want to bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. It may be a book I want to share, some gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check the show notes for this episode, and you can find it there, and I promise we won't sell or spam your email address. Before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you. If you got something out of this episode, if you were inspired by our conversation today, I want to challenge you right now to take a photo of your podcast player as you're playing this episode, and I want you to share it with 3 friends, people who you think need to hear what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend that they listen to it. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. If you have a few seconds, please leave a comment with your review because it really helps us spread the word about the show and it helps more cops find the valuable lessons that we have here. Also, join us on Facebook at our Facebook group, follow our page, and on Instagram at The Squad Room. A special thanks to today's sponsor, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important, check them out at OfficerPrivacy.com/The Squad Room, where their deal for you as a listener of this show is they'll give you a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, InTime. InTime is the state-of-the-art, easy-to-use, and incredibly simple way to schedule shifts, improve subpoena compliance, reduce officer fatigue, and manage special events, and much more. Make sure to check them out at intime.com/The Squad Room to learn more about their affordable and simple solutions for public safety. Also, there are some other great companies who support the podcast and support you as well. Go to thesquadroom.net/support to see exclusive deals from Signature Coins, Hard to Kill Fitness, Onnit, RangerUp, Hardhead Veterans, and Audible. And if you're looking for the best fitting ballistic helmet that exceeds NIJ standards and won't break the bank, check out hardheadveterans.com and use the coupon code SQUADROOM to get $20 off your helmet. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.